maybe a playset for your kids, trying to think like a parent, you can fit it back here and you have that versatility. Today we're driving a 2022 Chrysler Pacifica. There are a couple variations of the Pacifica. There's the Voyager trim, which is now fleet only, so it's like a fleet purpose, slightly decontented Pacifica. And then there's the Pacifica Hybrid, which is a little bit more desirable today than the standard Pacifica. But nonetheless, we are today sitting in a Chrysler, and a pretty nice one at that. Definitely a lot better than the Chryslers I remember from when I was growing up. And that's what this car is all about. This van is all about family and all about kids growing up, spending time in here, and the versatility that it offers. So all that I'll ask is that if you guys enjoyed this video, you throw it a like, and if you want to see more content like this as well as help make content like this possible, that you subscribe to the channel. Without further ado, let's get out onto the road. So starting at $42,000 even, this is a Touring L model, or trim I should say, which is the second of 4 total trim levels. Now up front, there is a 3.6 liter Pentastar V6, a very tried and true motor, fairly reliable, and it produces 287 horsepower and 262 pound-feet of torque. It's mated to a 9-speed automatic transmission, which is a pretty decent transmission here, and in this case is just driving the front wheels, although for an additional $3,000 you can get all-wheel drive in the Pacificas, except for the hybrid model. Personally, and especially because I'm out here in SoCal, I would save that $3,000. I don't necessarily think it's worth it, but I will admit that I've never driven an all-wheel drive Pacifica, so my preconceived notion of an opinion, I guess, would be to just save that money and stick with the front-wheel drive. You get a little better fuel economy, and that is 19 city, 28 highway. Now, 0 to 60 is, of course, slow, but I actually admit that this Pacifica drives a little better than I was expecting. Now, obviously, being a minivan, and I personally don't have a ton of experience driving minivans, quite a bit more experience hanging out in the back of them as a kid, but it can actually hold its own, and it's far from sensational and incredible, but you can enjoy driving this vehicle more than I think a lot of people would expect. I've heard this is probably one of the best driving minivans out there, but the real ceiling or winning factor here is the functionality. Up front, the seating position is pretty comfortable. I enjoy spending time in this, although I have personally no use for all this space myself. I do think it's pretty comfortable. I like the armrests you have. Overall, again, decent seating position, good visibility all throughout, large side mirrors, large windows overall, and in general, very little blind spot, which is always a good thing. You do have a rear view camera here and blind spot monitors as well with the standard here with the Pacifica with the Touring L. I believe in some of the higher trims you can also get a front camera, because I saw a blank up there, and maybe even some further safety features. But this does happen to have adaptive cruise control standard, which is also a really nice touch, so we can keep up with the car in front of you and pace out, so to speak, the vehicle in front of you. Well, since we're here at a light, let's do a little takeoff. Not too shabby. Some decent engine noise. So it feels a little more exciting than it maybe really is, but it has a good pickup and go, like most cars these days happen to have. Definitely not underwhelming acceleration wise for a minivan with sub 300 horsepower. But I will say one of the little irks that I have is, while this is a relatively nice place to spend some time in, I'm not actually a huge fan of the beige colored or lighter colored plastic and headliner you get in the Touring L. I believe in the base Touring model, basically the base Pacifica, you actually get all that blacked out, which I'd imagine would remain looking a little cleaner and probably looks a little sleeker personally. But the only other irk I have is, despite all the storage that this has, and it has a cool drawer hidden down here and a drawer that pulls out of the back here with a little storage and cup holders and just, yeah, some pretty good functionality up here. It doesn't really have a true center console, and I wish the center console kind of could extend back a couple more inches, because I don't really think it's adding it to a ton of rear seat functionality or comfort. So it's a little bit funky despite having these armrests to make up for it. It feels like my arm is going to just, hang down here. I don't know if you guys can even catch that on camera, but it's one little irk I have. Otherwise, the overall dash layout is pretty nice. This Uconnect 5 system is pretty snappy. This one doesn't have navigation cooked into it, but you can get that for additional money. I think just going ahead and using Apple Maps or Google Maps or Waze or whatever with your Apple CarPlay or Android Auto is the preferred method, and just saving the money of a probably okay navigation system. Center cluster, large screen in the middle, the digital speedometer, you got your tach and your analog speedometer as well. Overall, Pretty nice, pretty standard fare for Chrysler, Jeep, Ram products. It reminds me of my Jeep Wrangler 4xe cluster, which, by the way, link up here in the corner, and you guys can watch that if you're interested in Stellantis/FCA products. But moving on to the real creme de la creme of the Pacifica, that's the rear, and you have 3 rows, of course. There is an optional 3-seat configuration for the second row, although it seems like captain chairs are the norm when it comes to minivans and give you that easy and immediate access to the third row. They recline and they're pretty comfortable with plenty of leg room for the second row. The third row itself is also fairly comfortable, as you'd expect from a minivan. But the real sweet spot is that below or between the first and second rows down here, there's a bunch of storage, and you can lift it up and just store a bunch of stuff down there. In the trunk, despite having the third row up, you still have a good bit of space, and it's quite deep, which is always nice. It's, again, pretty standard when it comes to minivans. The coolest thing is if you really need a lot of space, the second row seats store within those kind of floor cubbies in the front, and the third row seats go back into that kind of deep part of the trunk and just give you this massive, flat, large cargo space or cargo area for you to transport whatever life throws at you. And again, that's that functionality of a minivan. This is obviously intended for families, so when you got the fam, you can stash things and hide things away, keep things away from your kids, or keep your kids' toys and stuff out of the way for other reasons. But when you need to transport something, maybe a playset for your kids, trying to think like a parent, you can fit it back here and you have that versatility. And the reality is there are obviously full-size SUVs with potentially more capability, more luxury, and maybe just about as much space, not quite as conveniently set up like a minivan. But the point is, a lot of those vehicles these days are going to cost close to 2 times the price of this, and some even more than that. Yeah, there are some more affordable options. One that comes to mind is the new Jeep, within the same family, the new Jeep Wagoneer, for instance, but that still is quite a bit more than this, and then the Grand Wagoneer is well over 2 times this. And the point I'm trying to make is that I think the affordability of a minivan combined with the functionality is what is really appealing for a potentially young and growing family. Now, as I mentioned, the Touring L model is not flooded with options, and there are 2 higher trims than this that can give you even more luxury amenities and features, and sunroof, back rear seat infotainment, and so on and so forth. But I think the Touring L is a pretty nice midpoint at about $42,000, $43,000. Gives you some decent standard tech, leather seats, and some of the other niceties you'd want. It looks decently sharp, but you get to save yourself some money and keep that price low and further away from those luxury or larger full-size SUVs. There's also a bunch of charging ports, USB B and C, for all your iPads, iPhones, and all the stuff that you and your kids will probably be bringing along with you as you hit the road in the Pacifica. Now, this would be the perfect time to jump into a little tall boy test and see just how many cans your kids can bring along with you in the back. So let's check that out now. Now, not that it's super important when it comes to minivans, but the looks of the Pacifica are pretty nice, and definitely a lot nicer than the previous gen Pacificas. Now, there was a pre-facelift of this generation that looked all right as well, but that old school last gen Pacifica did not look so nice. And generally speaking, minivans these days look about as good as minivans have ever looked, unless you're into that really funky 90s style. But that's like some Doug DeMuro. Otherwise, again, I said the interior is a nice place to spend time, and it feels kind of SUV-esque, which is a good thing, I believe. But the front has a decently aggressive look, again, for a minivan. I like the light signature both in front and the back with that extending LED all across the vehicle. You know, there's no escaping the shape of a minivan, but again, they've sleeked it out a little bit and made it look a little better. Personally, if I really had to, I'd probably end up getting the less practical but better looking Durango within this, again, brand of vehicles here at FCA/Stellantis. But you know, because some people do want to grab minivans for functionality, this is good looking and again drives pretty well. Now, when it comes to competition, I'd have to say something like the Kia Carnival, previously called the Sedona. That looks super sharp. And you know, the Honda Odyssey and the Toyota Sienna, which are again some of this vehicle's main competition, in fact its primary competition, all have their own pros and cons. They all look as good as they've ever looked, and they're actually, I believe, a little less than this. I think this is kind of the most expensive of the bunch per trim level, but its real advantage over the other two, one, is it's built here in the USA, and if you care about that, or if you want an American vehicle, not that there's any, in my opinion, objective strength to that, I guess, but if you're into that kind of thing, it is American built. But most importantly, it drives really nicely and it's very available. The Honda Odyssey is also pretty easy to get, but right now with these car shortages and this crazy car market, it's kind of hard to get your hands on a Carnival or a Sienna. So the availability of one of these and the fact that you can maybe strike up a good deal on one more easily, especially if you're considering that hybrid model, which I believe qualifies for that $7,500 federal incentive, you can definitely snatch one of these up without spending all too much money, getting something with good functionality, decent looks, drives decently well, and hopefully enjoy some time in it with your growing family. But with that said, if you guys have enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. New videos are dropping every single week on Fridays. Comment down below, let me know what you guys want to see, and I'll do my best to make it happen. As always, this is Rio. Peace out.